Last week, we brought you the story of the Loomis Fargo bank robbery in Charlotte, also known by locals as the Hillbilly Heist. The story was so wild, it inspired a movie adaptation. To my knowledge, this week's story of missing money, which spanned over a decade, hasn't been featured in a movie, but it did warrant its own episode of Forensic Files. While the perpetrators responsible for this string of robberies were eventually caught, the real mystery is what happened to all the money they stole. We'll also discuss a deadly explosion that occurred in the summer of 1972 in North Carolina that claimed the lives of 5 children. There is much to love about North and South Carolina, but the two states have also had their fair share of violent and senseless crimes over the years. From murders on the Blue Ridge Parkway, in the heart of big cities or sleepy college towns, and along the coastal waters, some of these stories may be new to you. Some may have happened in your town. Some may involve people that are still missing to this day. But all will leave you remembering to always be vigilant about the people you meet and the places you go. I'm Renee Robertson. Please join me for Missing in the Carolinas. Episode 143, The Bellamy Brothers Bank Robberies in North and South Carolina. In the 1990s, Horry, Georgetown, and Marion counties experienced a rise in bank robberies. According to the Myrtle Beach Sun News, 16 bank robberies occurred in the area in 1997. Only about 18% of that money was able to be recovered, and investigators found it thanks to dye packs that had been thrown into the bags of cash. The FBI stated that the robberies seemed to be spur-of-the-moment jobs for quick cash, noting that bank robbery is a very high-risk crime with little reward. Not long after this news article was published in 1998, the FBI would solve 9 bank robbery cases from the decade, all pulled off by the same trio of brothers. Alvin, Claude, and Larry Bellamy hailed from Little River, South Carolina. They came from a family of 12 children, and to everyone around them, they seemed like stand-up guys. Out of all the siblings, only one other was a criminal. In 1986, 36-year-old Clifton Bellamy Jr. killed his pregnant ex-girlfriend with a hammer after a fight over child support. The Bellamy brothers' sister Margie was and still is a magistrate judge in South Carolina. From 1991 to 1998, Alvin, Claude, and Larry Bellamy carried out 9 armed bank robberies in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Calabash, North Carolina. Their robberies all had common elements. None of the banks that they robbed had an armed security detail. The biggest of the trio would always threaten the employees. He struck, dragged, and beat the tellers. The robbers would also tell employees to not throw dye kits into the cash that they were stealing, and for them to not give them bait dollars. Bait money is a set of bills with serial numbers recorded by the bank. It helps to trace money stolen during a bank robbery. The cars used as the getaway vehicles were almost always stolen, which made tracing the plates useless. The robberies usually lasted somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. In September of 1991, the brothers robbed a bank in Calabash. Security cameras recorded 2 of the brothers entering the bank just after an armored truck made its daily delivery. They stole over $40,000 worth of money from the bank. Even though the teller pulled the silent alarm, the brothers got away because the nearest police station was half an hour away from the bank. The cameras caught them fleeing the scene in a Camaro, but it didn't catch the license plate number. It wouldn't have done much good if it had, however, as the car had been stolen specifically to use as a getaway vehicle. The next year, the brothers returned to rob the same bank again and were recognized by one of the employees that worked there. They got away with around $20,000 that time. After that, they returned 4 years later for a third robbery. This third robbery was their largest heist, with the brothers stealing around $175,000 from the bank. During this heist, a witness saw the brothers get into a green getaway car after the robbery. He wrote down the plate number and tried to follow the men, but the brothers turned the car around and pulled a gun on the witness, so he gave up the pursuit. One of the other robberies occurred on Valentine's Day in 1991. The First Atlantic Bank in Little River was robbed around 2 p.m. The brothers stole around $25,000 from the bank that day. The tellers reported that 2 of the men had entered with handguns and Navy ski masks. The brothers made everyone get down on the ground. One teller, Candy Cherry, was ordered to load up money for them. One of the brothers screamed, "Don't give me bait money." Cherry noted that a robber who was smart enough to mention bait money must have really meant business. The brothers fled in a gray Toyota. While they were being pushed around, some of the employees managed to alert people to the robbery. Cherry alerted a woman in the drive-thru line who called 911. That woman, Ginger Westfall, was a regular at the bank and friends with a lot of the tellers. She was scared for them, hoping that the robbers hadn't seen Cherry mouth the words, "We're being robbed," to her. The bank president managed to trip the silent alarm. Thankfully, nobody was harmed in the robbery. Unlike the Loomis Fargo heist in our previous episode, where the culprits didn't really know what they were doing, the Bellamy brothers had a good understanding of how to pull off a heist, and for good reason. Claude was a former patrolman who had worked for the Horry County Police Department, and Larry was a lieutenant with the Myrtle Beach Police Department. Alvin was the only member of the trio who had no law enforcement experience and instead worked as a landscaper. The brothers didn't flaunt their wealth after the heists. Their modest lifestyles, combined with no clear motive, prevented them from becoming suspects. All of the getaway cars, save for one, were stolen. This helped the brothers avoid being traced, as the license plate numbers became useless. By 1998, local investigators had begun to piece together evidence. One thing that caught the attention of the investigators was the way that the robbers handled their guns. One of them wore a holster to carry his gun, and he would do what is known as a weaver stance, something that is taught in weapons training for law enforcement officers. This pointed to at least one of the trio being a law enforcement officer. They were correct about this, as Larry was a crime scene specialist. Larry had even investigated one of his own crimes, unbeknownst to the police. The crime that he investigated involved one of the stolen cars, the green one, that the brothers used for their crimes. His timesheets proved that he hadn't been working at the times when the robberies occurred. In hindsight, the law enforcement background is easy to spot. The brothers would always tell the employees to not throw a dye pack into the cash, use the stolen cars, and made sure to limit their spending because they knew what things would lead to them getting caught. They used their insider knowledge to cover their tracks for almost a decade. Before we continue, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. There are a lot of trends floating around on social media on the best way to keep your skin looking hydrated and youthful. But I don't like to follow fads, especially when I find a product that works. Enter the products from SkinX Erin. I use her Pre-Cleanse Oil, Hydrating Beauty Oil, and Perfecting Night Oil, and I was hooked from the first drop. The Pre-Cleanse gently removes dirt, impurities, and even waterproof makeup without tugging, without stripping or drying out your skin. In addition to keeping your skin clear, it also helps your skin feel firmer and reduces the signs of aging. The Hydrating Beauty Oil is a powerful and effective skin hydrator that never leaves your skin feeling greasy. The signature squalene oil is known for its anti-inflammatory and anti-aging properties. It's perfect for treating skin conditions like acne and eczema and reducing the appearance of wrinkles. The Perfecting Night Oil is loaded with vitamins E and A and is rich with antioxidants and omegas that nourish skin, replenish elasticity, and reduce stretch marks. A few drops a day leave skin smoother, more vibrant, and youthful. My skin instantly drinks in these oils, and I've never had a problem with them leaving residue on my clothes or sheets at night, only giving me a healthy glow. Want to try out the products for yourself? Go to shopxerin.com and use the code MissingCarolinas10 for a 10% discount on your order. I had been unhappy with my old podcast host for a while and was looking for other options. I discovered Riverside FM and learned that for one low monthly fee, it would help me record the podcast and utilize video capabilities. It uses AI technology to easily create clips from each episode that I can share on my social media accounts. I don't consider myself very tech savvy, but audio and video editing with Riverside FM software has been a breeze, and I look forward to recording days now. If you're looking for a company that will help you with all your podcasting, webinar, and video needs, I encourage you to check out Riverside FM. You won't be disappointed. I'll include a link for you in the show notes.
I'm Josh Mankiewicz, and I hope you'll join us for Season 4 of Dateline Missing in America. In each episode of Dateline's award-winning series, we will focus on one missing persons case and hear from the families, the friends, and the investigators, all desperate to find them. You will want to listen closely. Maybe you could help investigators solve a mystery.
Dateline Missing in America. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
And now, let's get back to the show. The trio of brothers slipped up during one of their final robberies. They had always used stolen vehicles to avoid being traced, but they didn't end up doing this for one robbery. A customer at one of the bank's drive-through windows wrote down their license plate number, and it was later determined that the vehicle, a red SUV, belonged to Alvin Bellamy. The brothers, who by that time were all in their 40s, were arrested in August of 1999. They were charged with 9 bank robberies in the Myrtle Beach and Calabash areas. The amount stolen totaled around $700,000, but none of it was recovered. The brothers were held in the New Hanover County Jail in Wilmington, and a judge denied them bond due to the evidence against them. The brothers were accused of lying by the FBI agent who questioned them. At their trial, which began in January of 2000, Special Agent Craig Ackley said that Claude kept a calm demeanor throughout their interview and denied that he and his brothers were involved in the Calabash BB&T robbery. Agent Craig went to interrogate Alvin, but ended up speaking to his wife instead since Alvin wasn't home. Larry showed up while he was there and offered the information that Alvin had been with him all day on the day of the heist. Craig asked Larry if he knew where his brother lived, and he said that he didn't know where Claude lived. Agent Craig thought that this was a lie because Claude lived around 25 yards from Larry on Old Crane Road. Many of the bank tellers and employees testified against the brothers. One woman named Donna testified that she had just learned she was pregnant the day of the robbery. The incident made her decide to quit banking. Donna's coworker, Denise, recalled how she had been threatened when she couldn't remember the vault's combination, and how she had a gun barrel-shaped bruise on her neck for being forced into the vault afterwards. The tellers said that the men had smelled of alcohol, something that Agent Craig had noticed when interrogating the siblings. It was assumed that one of the witnesses, Constance Parrish, would identify Claude Bellamy as the man she saw outside the National Bank the day of the robbery, but she said during the trial that she wasn't quite sure it was him. She had been at the drive-through window when she saw him, and immediately thought something was suspicious since he was wearing a ski mask. She said she saw him speed off in a blue truck before calling 911. Parrish didn't want to testify in the trial, but she was told that she would be subpoenaed if she didn't. Several of Larry's former police coworkers testified in the trial, one of which was Police Chief Warren Gall. Gall said that he considered Larry a very good friend and team member. He confirmed Larry's timesheets all indicated he had taken time off of work the days the crimes were committed. He was also able to point out Larry when looking at the crime scene photos. Another officer who testified was Captain Joe Vella, Larry's best friend. Joe stated that while Larry did have some nice items in his house, he had never seen him with a large amount of cash. Joe also testified that Larry did drink a lot in the afternoons, but that it never got in the way of his work. He said he recognized Larry in the surveillance photos, but that he still cared about him. Kenny Dixon Jr., a public accountant and fraud examiner, testified on Claude's behalf. His investigation found that Claude Bellamy's reported income was fluctuating, but he couldn't trace where that money had been spent. It seemed like he had been living off cash advances, retirement, and other money he had saved. Claude was also in debt at the time. Some forensic evidence that was used against the brothers was a checkered jacket and a leather holster used in the crimes that were later discovered to be in possession of the Bellamys, the jacket being found in Claude's closet. The FBI had also investigated a group of unidentified men who tried to intimidate one of the witnesses for the prosecution by threatening to cut out his eyes and kill his family. Federal agents believed these threats originated with one or all 3 of the brothers, but couldn't pinpoint who. All 3 brothers pleaded not guilty. After 2 weeks and 70 different witnesses, the Bellamy brothers were convicted on February 22, 2000. Alvin, the youngest brother and the landscaper, received 15 years in prison. His brothers got harsher sentences of 50 years in jail because they had betrayed their badges. The brothers were allowed to request one of the 97 federal prisons to serve their sentences at. Alvin got out of prison in 2008. Claude died at the age of 61 back in 2016. Larry is now 67 and is serving his time in a medium security facility in West Virginia. The courts rejected all of Larry's appeal attempts. He is scheduled for release in 2042 at the age of 90. To this day, the $700,000 stolen by the brothers has not been recovered. A big question about this case is why. Unlike with a lot of robbers, the Bellamys did not have a clear motive for pulling off as many heists as they did. They didn't seem to spend the money that they were stealing. While not every robber buys an expensive mansion like the one we saw in the Loomis Fargo heist, it's expected that the money from a heist will be spent eventually. The brothers didn't move out of their homes, and they seemingly weren't paying off debt. They stayed in the area and just kept robbing banks. Maybe they were doing it for the thrill, or maybe they were just supplementing their meager incomes. Another theory is that one or more of the robbers had become addicted to gambling, but I guess we'll never know what motivated this particular string of robberies. There's one more story I wanted to share today. Sometimes I come across interesting news items that don't warrant a full episode, and that's the case with this one, featuring an accidental explosion that killed 5 children in Valdese, North Carolina in June of 1972. The story actually begins 10 years earlier, when a man named James Edward Bunt Garreau and 2 of his brothers built a large fallout shelter in the yard of Bunt's home. Bunt was an executive at the Alba Waldnesian Inc. textile firm. The year was 1962, and the brothers who lived in the small town of Valdese in Burke County were fearful of a nuclear attack amid the Cuban Missile Crisis. They used local contractors to construct a concrete shelter large enough to hold 13 people. About 20 other families in Morganton did the same. The floor and walls of the shelter were poured concrete with a ceiling of about 12 inches thick and reinforced with steel rods. It featured a ventilation system, bunks, a kitchen, and a commode. Over the years, Bunt and his brothers kept the shelter stocked with food, water, blankets, and other supplies. They placed a gasoline generator for electric power and a 250-gallon tank for gasoline storage outside of the shelter. Bunt had an adopted daughter, 12-year-old Jean Garreau. She knew she wasn't supposed to play in the fallout shelter, but on May 30th, 1972, she obtained the key and took 5 of her friends, 12-year-old Regina Robinson, 14-year-old Donald Robinson Jr., 10-year-old Michael Powell, 12-year-old Gloria Hammond, and 10-year-old Bee Picou to the location down the hill from her family's home. Bee Picou later told the police the children had found the secret key to the fallout shelter and had been playing inside of it. They had seen pools of gasoline on the floor of the shelter, but were afraid to tell Jean's dad about it because they weren't supposed to be in there. Earlier that evening, Bunt Garreau had seen his daughter and her friends playing around a basketball court near the bomb shelter. He said the last time he'd seen them, they were sitting on the curb together. Around 6:45 p.m., a fiery explosion occurred at the site of the fallout shelter on the Garreau property. Residents from Valdese all the way to Connolly Springs wondered what had caused the ground to shake so violently. Burke County Fire Marshal Marvin Sawyer theorized gasoline fumes from a leak had built up, and a spark from the light switch inside the shelter ignited the fumes. The children may have been playing in the shelter the week before and accidentally caused the gasoline leak. Regina Robinson was thrown 75 yards into the street. Jean Garreau was thrown 25 yards from the entrance. The bodies of Gloria Hammond and Mike Powell were found on the steps of the shelter. Donald Robinson was located in the hall. Bee Picou was injured but had been standing off to the side of the shelter's entrance. She was the only survivor of the blast. Bee's father later told the media it was a miracle his daughter had survived. The Charlotte Observer reported that 10-year-old Michael Powell had been the talk of the town earlier in the week when he hit a home run at his Little League baseball game. Jean Garreau had just written a letter to the Reverend Billy Graham that said, "For a little kid, I have got adult problems, but the funny thing is I'm not scared of those problems. Believe it or not, I already know what my job is on earth. It is to be a minister or a missionary." A year after the explosion, local residents dedicated a park to the 5 children who lost their lives. Children's Memorial Park sits off Main Street near the downtown area. It's dedicated to the memories of Jean Garreau, Gloria Hammond, Michael Powell, and Donald and Regina Robinson. This brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Missing in the Carolinas. Special thanks to Mia Robertson for writing this week's script about the Bellamy brothers' bank robberies. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and give it a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you'd also like to support the show in a small way, you can buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com, Renee Robertson. Thank you so much for those who've already supported me through this platform. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, so please like our pages and get started on a discussion of the missing people profiled on the show. Do you know of a missing persons case in North or South Carolina that you think should be covered? Email me at missinginthecarolinas@gmail.com with any details you can share. Cover art for this podcast was designed by Macintosh Multimedia. Sound editing is provided by Daniel Robertson. Thanks so much for listening.